يا شهر الندى.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين. We start with the name of Allah. We praise and thank Allah, the Exalted, for the givings He gave without Allah being obligated to give anything. We ask Allah to raise the rank of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the ranks of his wives, believing relatives, companions, and those who follow them sincerely until the Judgment Day. And we ask Allah to protect the nation of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam from what the Prophet feared for his nation. Thereafter, in the previous lesson, we finished to talk about the obligatory wudu. And we mentioned that washing the feet is the fifth integral, that is, washing the feet up to and including the ankles. Or wiping over the khuf if the conditions for wiping over the khuf were fulfilled. So here we'll take a moment to mention what are those conditions for wiping over the khuf. First of all, the khuf needs to cover the entire foot, that is the part that is obligatory to be washed. So the foot up to and including the ankles. It needs to cover that from the bottom and from the sides, even if you look down from above into the khuf, you could see, for example, the ankles. So it needs to cover the entire part of the foot that's obligatory to be washed for wudu. Secondly, it needs to be of a material that prevents the penetration of water, whether that was leather or patent leather or like a rubber type substance or a plastic, for example. It would need to prevent the penetration of water. It doesn't mean that it would be made in such a way that it's completely waterproof, so that a person, if he submerged his entire foot into a body of water and left it there, that his foot would remain completely dry. That's not what's meant, but that it would be made of a material that prevents the penetration of water, like we mentioned. Third, it needs to be made it needs to be strong, tough in a way that it would hold up to the walking needed by the traveler to fulfill his needs and run errands. So if it was made of a tough enough material so that if a traveler, when he sat down, for example, when he took a break in his travel and he needed to go run errands, and then he loaded back up and he walked with his animal a bit, if the khuf could bear that without ripping apart or having holes punctured in it, etc., then this would be strong enough to suffice as a khuf that is wiped over instead of washing the foot. Likewise, the khuf must be made of a pure material, and not that it would be made of najis in itself, like pigskin, for example. And finally, the khuf must be applied after complete purification. So the person who is lifted the state of major ritual impurity and the minor ritual impurity, he applies the khuf after he has completed the wudu. He doesn't make the wudu and then wash one foot, then apply the khuf, then wash the second foot, then apply the khuf. In this case, he did not apply the two khufs after a complete wudu. So in this case, he would need to remove the first khuf that he applied, and then he could reapply it, and he would be allowed to wipe over the khuf. So he must apply the khufs, the foot gear, after a complete purification. After doing that, if he was not in the state of a traveler, he would be allowed to wipe over the khuf for one full day from the time that the cause for ritual impurity ended. So if, for example, a person made wudu and then applied the khuf, and then he slept, then when he wakes up, this is the end of what caused the ritual impurity. So he would start calculating the duration for wiping over the khuf from the time that he woke up, not the time when he first went to sleep. And then he would calculate 1 full day. So the same time and the following day, that will be the end of the duration in which he is allowed to wipe over the khuf. If he was in the state of a traveler who is traveling that permits if he was in the state of a traveler, then he would be able to wipe 72 hours, 3 full days. And similarly, as we said before, from the end of what caused the ritual impurity. If the khuf becomes no longer sufficient for wiping upon, like for example, it gets ripped up, then he can no longer wipe over the khuf. Or if he removes it, he would no longer wipe over the khuf. Likewise, that which makes the ghusl obligatory would be a reason for the duration to end. So if he did something, if something occurred to him that caused him to be in a state of major ritual impurity, then he would no longer wipe over the khuf after that as well. So if a person made his full wudu and then he applied the khufs, he could wipe over the khufs instead of washing the feet, and this makes it easier for people in different situations. Then the author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, went into a section of invalidators of the wudu, ablution. In section 8, he said, ablution is invalidated by what is emitted from the eliminatory outlets except mani. Mani is the ejaculated fluid. He said, fluid usually discharged by males and females during orgasm. And it has its own descriptions and own attributes. Inshallah, we'll get into that when we get to the section of ghusl. So, if anything came out of one's penis, anus, or vagina, liquid, solid, or gas, other than this mani, then one's wudu would be invalidated. Whether that thing was common or uncommon, common like urine or feces, or gas, uncommon like blood, for example, or even if a person had a parasitic worm in his belly and then it exited from him, from his rectum, from his anus, then this would be a reason that the wudu would be invalidated. Then he said, touching the penis, vulva, or anus of a human with the inside part of the hand without a barrier. So here we're talking about touching the private parts of a human. So this excludes a non-human, like an animal, like a cow, for example, or a horse. If a person touched the private part of one of those animals, it doesn't invalidate wudu. However, touching the private part of a human, any human, whether it was oneself, one's non-marriageable relatives, or a marriageable person, male or female, the same gender or an opposing gender, if they touch the private part of that person with the inside part of the bare hand, it invalidates the wudu. When we say the private parts, is as mentioned, the penis, which is the shaft and the head of the penis, the vulva, and the anus. And the anus is the part that comes together from which the filth exits. Yani that ring from which the feces exits. Yani that skin that closes together and then the filth exits from it. So we're not talking about the buttocks. If a person touches the buttocks, that doesn't invalidate one's wudu. If a person touched the testicles, that doesn't invalidate one's wudu. Unless it was, for example, the buttocks of a marriageable person, of the opposite marital person, and both of the parties have reached a state at which they're normally desired, but that would be losing wudu for a different reason. He said, touching the skin of a marriageable female who reached an age at which she is normally desired. So here, let's go back to the last one. Sorry, he said with the inside part of the bare hand, meaning that it's the part of the hand that you don't see when you put your hands together like this. You spread your fingers a little bit and you apply slight pressure. All right, so for the 4 fingers and the palm, this is the inside part of the bare hand. For the 4 fingers and the palm, this is the inside part of the bare hand, which you don't see when you have your hand together like this. As for the thumb, this part that is together here is not the inside part of the thumb that is considered when we're talking about the one who, if he touches it to the private part of a human, his wudu would be invalidated. Rather, for the thumb, it's when you put your fingers, your hands opposing like this with the thumbs. It's what you don't see in this scenario, okay? So this is the inside part of the hand. So if a person touched the private part with the edge of the finger, or the very front part of the tip of the finger, or the backhand side, for example, then that wouldn't break one's wudu. Just touching the private part with some other part doesn't break one's wudu. Rather, it must be the inside part of the bare hand. So obviously, this makes it understood that if a person was wearing a glove, all right, then it's something that blocks the actual skin-to-skin contact. Then if he grabbed the private part while his hand was in a glove, then that wouldn't invalidate one's wudu. Moving to the third invalidator of wudu, he said, touching the skin of a marriageable female who reached an age at which she is normally desired. So here it has to be skin-to-skin contact. This excludes hair. So if a man touched a woman's hair, then it doesn't break his wudu. This excludes tooth, and this excludes nail. These are not skin. So if a man touched his skin to a woman's tooth or nail or hair, or a woman touched her skin to a man's tooth or hair or nail, then this would not invalidate one's wudu. It doesn't mean that it's permissible for one to just touch a marriageable person's hair, nail, or teeth, but one would be aware that if this occurred, then it wouldn't invalidate wudu. And those things may happen by mistake sometimes. Subhanallah. So he said, touching the skin of a marriageable female. So this excludes the mahram. All right. The mahram is the person who one is prohibited from marrying forever, under every circumstance. There's no possible way that he would marry this person. And there's different reasons why a person will be considered one's mahram. Some reasons are due to blood relation, lineage. Some reasons are due to marriage, and some reasons are due to nursing. So if a person was a certain relative to another, like one's siblings, then skin-to-skin contact would not break the wudu. So if a man touched his sister skin-to-skin, even if she was an adult, then he wouldn't break his wudu. Of course, we're not talking about the private part. That's a different case. Likewise, one's parents and foreparents, like one touching his mother or his grandmother or his great-grandmother, this would not break one's wudu, even if it was skin-to-skin contact. Likewise, one's children and descendants. So if a man touched his daughter or granddaughter or great-granddaughter, then he would not break his wudu. In addition to that, there are the uncles, which are one's parents, brothers, and the aunts, which are one's parents' sisters, one's parents' sisters. So the person does not break their wudu by having skin-to-skin contact with his maternal aunts and uncles or his paternal aunts and uncles. Whether he touched skin-to-skin his father's brothers and sisters or his mother's brothers and sisters, he doesn't break his wudu. And likewise, his nieces and nephews, who are his own siblings' children. So if a man touched his brother's daughter or his sister's daughter skin-to-skin, then he would not break his wudu. Of course, these people, it's permissible to touch them, but of course without desire. Another example of the mahram is someone who is a mahram due to marriage. So an example of that is a man's wife's mother. Once a man has a marriage contract, once he marries a woman, then her mother becomes forbidden for him forever. He could never marry her under any circumstance. Even if his marriage to the woman who was presently his wife dissolved, even if he got a divorce or the marriage was undone for some other reason, then still her mother would be forbidden from him. So if they had skin-to-skin contact after that, his wudu would not be broken from her. And there are other examples. And there are also examples of mahram due to nursing. There are certain scenarios where a person due to nursing would be considered like a child to the woman who nursed him. So in this case, that child would not be able to marry that woman in any case, and her daughter would be like his sister, so he couldn't marry her daughter. Then in that case, if they had skin-to-skin contact, likewise, the wudu would not be broken. He said, who reached an age at which she is normally desired. So if a man had skin-to-skin contact with a woman who was not his mahram, meaning that Islamically she's marriageable, and however, she was small, she was an infant, for example, or a toddler, meaning that she hasn't reached a state of physical development where she is desired by the people of a normal, healthy and sound nature, a sound nature, a normal and sound nature. Then he wouldn't break his wudu. Rather, both parties, the male and the female, need to be at a state at which they're normally desired. It doesn't mean that they have to be physically attractive, like in their face, for example, like beautiful. Rather, it means that they will reach a state of physical development, and this differs from person to person. What is the age that they are when they reach that state of physical development when they are normally desired? Some people, it may happen to them younger, and some people, it may happen to them a bit older. But when that person gets to that state where, they become tall, they, for example, they start to have those attributes that normal people, not sick, perverted people, but normal people find desirable for marriage, then that's when this person has reached this state. So it's not like one specific year that applies to every person the same. No, it could differ from person to person. So when the person reaches that state, then if both parties are in that state, meaning they're both at a state where they're normally desired, then if the man and the female have skin-to-skin contact, then both of their wudu would be broken. However, as we said, if a woman picked up a small boy, and even if he was marriageable, not a mahram for her, for example, and they had skin-to-skin contact, she kissed him on the cheek, she held his hand, she doesn't break her wudu. And likewise, if a man had skin-to-skin contact with a small girl, then he would not break his wudu. Then the author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, losing one's consciousness or sanity, except if one is sleeping and one's buttocks, with one's buttocks while firmly planted. Here he says, with one's buttocks while firmly planted. What it means is, except if one was sleeping seated with his buttocks firmly planted. So if a person lost consciousness through sleep, through insanity, through fainting, through seizure, etc., then their wudu would be broken. Their wudu would be broken. So when they wake up, they will be required to renew their wudu before prayer. Unless a person slept sitting, and he was sitting in a position where his buttocks was firmly planted in a way that he was secure from anything exiting. If he slept in this position and woke up in the same position, meaning he didn't move, then he would consider that he was still on wudu. That is, if he made wudu and went to sleep without committing any of the invalidators, and he slept in this format, and he stayed in that position and woke up in the same position, then he could immediately just go pray without renewing one's wudu. However, if he slept in a different position, even if he claimed that his buttocks was firmly planted, but he wasn't seated, so like the person who's laying on his back or laying on his side or laying on his stomach, then that would not be the same judgment. Rather, he will be required to renew his wudu when he woke up. And when we say sleep, we mean actual sleep, and sleep has some signs. It's not the same as just a person dozing to a certain extent without actually falling completely asleep. If a person can hear what's in his surroundings, then he's not considered that he actually slept. If he can hear what's going on in his surroundings, even if he doesn't make out everything word for word, then it's not considered that he actually slept. However, some of the signs of one having actually slept is for one to dream. If a person had a dream, then that is a sign that he actually fell asleep. So, if a person fell asleep, if he didn't fall asleep, if he just was drowsy, and so he was like dozing off without completely falling asleep, that is, he could still hear what was going on in his surroundings, then he wouldn't need to renew his wudu after that. But if he slept, then he would renew his wudu unless he slept with his buttocks firmly planted in the way that we described. And Allah the Exalted knows best. Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
يا شهر الخيرات والإحسان والبركات يا رمضان